She didn't even let me set it down on the table. "We only serve catering from licensed professionals," she said, glancing at my pie like it was something I'd dragged in from a garage sale. That was it. No thank you, no smile. Just those 8 words delivered with a tight little laugh that made my stomach drop. I didn't argue. I just nodded, tucked the dish back under the foil, and held it against my chest like it might shatter if I moved too fast. Sophie was standing by the staircase, her birthday crown tilted sideways on her head. She'd been running toward me when I came in. Now she stood frozen, looking at her mother, then at me, unsure who to believe. "It's fine, sweetheart," I said softly. "Grandma just brought the wrong thing." But it wasn't the wrong thing. It was Harold's recipe, the one he made every year for Sophie's birthday, until his hands got too shaky to roll the crust. The one I'd been practicing for 6 months after he passed, adjusting the cinnamon, testing the lattice, crying into the flour more times than I'll ever admit. Apple pie with brown butter and a pinch of cardamom. Our secret. His legacy. Jessica was already walking toward the kitchen, her heels clicking against the marble floor they'd installed last spring. The house smelled like lavender diffusers and something artificially clean. There were caterers in white jackets arranging tiny desserts on silver trays, each one identical, each one looking like it came from a magazine. "I appreciate the gesture," Jessica called over her shoulder. "Really. But we have a theme this year, Parisian patisserie. Your pie would just confuse the aesthetic." Confuse the aesthetic. I looked down at the dish in my hands. The lattice wasn't perfect. I'd never claimed to be a baker, but I'd spent 4 hours that morning rolling, cutting, crimping the edges the way Harold taught me. I'd driven 40 minutes with the pie buckled into the passenger seat like a sleeping child. Sophie took a step toward me, her little hand reaching out. "Grandma, can I?" "Sophie." Jessica's voice was sharp. "Go wash your hands. The guests are arriving soon." She hesitated, then turned and ran upstairs without looking back. I stood there for another moment, alone in the foyer, holding a pie that no one wanted. Then I walked out the front door, down the stone path, past the valet they'd hired for a child's birthday party, and got into my 15-year-old Honda that looked like it had wandered in from another decade. I didn't cry, not yet. I just sat there in the driver's seat, staring at the house through the windshield, the chandelier in the front window, the perfectly trimmed hedges, the wreath on the door that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. I was 67 years old, and I had just been told, in the politest possible way, that I didn't belong. The drive home took longer than usual. I kept missing turns, stopping at green lights, forgetting where I was going. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the sun was setting, and the pie had gone cold. I carried it inside and set it on the kitchen counter, right next to the ceramic rooster Harold bought me at a flea market in 1987. The house was quiet. Not peaceful quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears and reminds you that no one's coming home. I didn't turn on the lights. I just stood there in the dark kitchen, looking at the pie, thinking about all the years I'd spent trying to be enough. The recipe cards were still in the drawer. Harold's handwriting, faded but familiar. Apple pie, Eleanor's version. He'd written at the top of one, even though we both knew it was his recipe. He just wanted me to feel like it was mine, too. I pulled out a chair and sat down heavily, my knees aching, my chest tight. I'd been doing this for years, showing up, bringing things, trying not to take up too much space. And for what? Jessica had made it clear from the beginning that I wasn't quite up to standard. The first Thanksgiving after they got married, she'd quietly replaced my green bean casserole with one from a gourmet deli. "Just in case," she'd said, as if my cooking might poison someone. The Christmas I knitted Sophie a blanket. It disappeared into a closet and never came out. "She has allergies," Jessica explained, though Sophie had never sneezed once in her life. My son David never said anything. He just looked away, poured more wine, changed the subject. I told myself he was caught in the middle. I told myself he loved me but didn't know how to show it. I told myself a lot of things that weren't true. I picked up the pie and threw it in the trash. Not out of anger, not yet, just because I couldn't stand to look at it anymore. Then I sat back down, pulled out my notebook, the one I used for grocery lists and birthday reminders, and wrote a single sentence at the top of a blank page. No more giving where there is no welcome. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but something inside me, something that had been sleeping for a very long time, was starting to wake up. The next few days passed slowly. I didn't call anyone. No one called me. I kept expecting David to reach out, maybe apologize, maybe explain, but my phone stayed silent, and that silence told me everything I needed to know. On Thursday morning, I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table with the metal box I kept in the back of my closet. Inside were bank statements, receipts, and copies of every check I'd written to help my son's family over the past 8 years. The down payment on their house. $32,000, just until we get on our feet, David had said. They never mentioned it again. Sophie's private school tuition for 2 years. I'd offered to help when Jessica insisted on a Montessori program that cost more than some colleges. It builds leadership skills, she'd told me, as if public school built nothing at all. The credit cards, 2 of them, technically in my name, used for emergencies. I'd never asked what the emergencies were. I didn't want to know. I added it up on a napkin. Then I added it again, because the number didn't seem real. $114,000. I'd never told Harold how much I'd given after he passed. He would have been furious. Not about the money, but about the way it was taken. Without thanks, without acknowledgement, like it was owed. I picked up the phone and dialed the bank. Good morning. This is Patricia at First National. How can I help you today? I'd like to cancel some automatic payments, I said. My voice was steady, calmer than I expected. Of course. Can I have your account number? I gave it to her. Then I listed everything. The tuition transfers, the mortgage supplement, the credit card authorizations. Would you like to notify the account holders? Patricia asked gently. No, I said. If they notice, they can call me. I hung up before I could second-guess myself. Then I opened my address book and found the number for my lawyer, the same one who'd handled Harold's estate. I hadn't spoken to him in 3 years. Mrs. Whitmore, he said when I called. It's been a while. What can I do for you? I need to update my will. There was a pause. Anything significant? Yes, I said. Everything. I drove to his office the next morning. The same cluttered room, the same diplomas on the wall, the same slightly crooked blinds. He hadn't changed much, and neither had I, except now I knew what I wanted. I'm removing my son as the primary beneficiary, I told him. I want to set up a trust for my granddaughter. Restricted access until she's 25. No parental control. He raised an eyebrow but didn't question it. Lawyers learn not to ask. And the rest? Split between the community kitchen downtown and the women's shelter on Pine Street. I volunteered there for years. They do good work. What about David? I looked at him steadily. David made his choice. I'm making mine. When I got home, I pulled out a sheet of stationery I'd been saving for something special. Cream-colored, with a faint floral border. I'd bought it for thank you notes that I never had reason to write. I sat at the table and began. My sweet Sophie, if you're reading this, I'm no longer here to say these things out loud. But I want you to know something that I never said enough when I could. I wrote for an hour. About the pie. About her grandfather. About the way she used to sit on my kitchen counter and lick the spoon while the filling bubbled on the stove. About how she was allowed to be soft in a world that would try to make her hard. I told her the house was hers if she wanted it, that the money would be waiting when she was ready, that I hoped she'd remember me not as someone who gave up, but as someone who finally stood up. I sealed the letter, wrote her name on the envelope, and placed it in the drawer with Harold's recipes. Then I sat in the quiet kitchen and let myself feel the weight of what I'd done. Not revenge, not punishment, just clarity. For the first time in years, I slept through the night. A week passed, then 2. I heard nothing from David or Jessica. The school called once, confused about a bounced payment, and I told them to contact the parents directly. That was all. I started going back to the community center. Tuesday mornings, bread baking class. Thursday afternoons, mending circle. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed the company of women who didn't need me to be impressive. Margaret, who ran the mending group, noticed the change first. "You're sitting up straighter," she said one afternoon, squinting at me over her reading glasses. "Am I? You look like someone who stopped apologizing." I laughed. It surprised me. I hadn't laughed like that in months. On a gray afternoon in late October, I found a note in my mailbox. No stamp, no address, just my name in careful, wobbly letters. I opened it at the kitchen table, already knowing. "Grandma, I'm sorry Mommy was mean about the pie. I really wanted to try it. I remember when Grandpa used to make it and I got to help put the apples in. Can you teach me how to make it? I won't tell anyone. Love, Sophie." She'd drawn a little pie at the bottom, lopsided, with steam lines rising from the top. I pressed the note to my chest and closed my eyes. She remembered. Not just the pie, but the feeling, the warmth of the kitchen, the smell of cinnamon, the way her grandfather used to hum while he worked. I didn't call her parents. I didn't ask permission. I just wrote back, "Dear Sophie, of course I'll teach you. Come, whenever you're ready, bring your appetite and your questions. I have flour and time and all the love in the world. Your grandmother." I gave the note to her school bus driver, a kind man named George, who'd been driving that route for 15 years. He promised to slip it to her quietly. 3 days later, she showed up at my door. It was a Saturday. Her father had dropped her at a friend's house, she said, but the friend's mother had agreed to cover for her. "I told Mommy I was doing a school project," Sophie said, standing on my porch with her jacket zipped up to her chin. She didn't ask what kind. I didn't scold her. I didn't lecture about honesty. I just opened the door and said, "Come in." The butter's already softening. We baked together that afternoon. I taught her how to measure flour by weight, not volume. How to cut butter into cubes and keep it cold. How to roll the dough from the center outward, never pressing too hard. She asked 100 questions. "Why do we put lemon juice in the apples?" "To keep them from turning brown and to balance the sweetness." "Why does the crust have to rest?" "Because good things take time. Dough needs to relax before it can hold its shape." She nodded seriously, like I was teaching her something sacred. And maybe I was. When the pie came out of the oven, golden and bubbling, she pressed her face close to the steam and breathed in. "It smells like Grandpa's house," she whispered. I had to turn away so she wouldn't see me cry. After that, Sophie came every Saturday. Sometimes David dropped her off without coming inside. Sometimes she took the bus and walked the last 3 blocks herself. Jessica never called, never asked where she was going. I wasn't sure if she knew or simply didn't care. We baked pies, of course, but we also made bread and cookies and soup from scratch. I taught her to darn socks, even though no one darns socks anymore. I taught her to read a recipe like a story, to taste as she cooked, to trust her hands. One afternoon, while we were waiting for a batch of rolls to rise, she looked up at me and said, "Mommy says handmade things are for people who can't afford real ones." I set down my dish towel. "What do you think?" She considered this. "I think handmade things are for people who care enough to try." I smiled. "Then you already know more than most adults." November came with early frost and shorter days. The trees on my street turned gold and then bare, and the light through my kitchen window grew softer, more forgiving. I hadn't heard from David in over a month. Then, one evening, my phone rang. "Mom." His voice was tight. "We need to talk." I waited. The bank called. The payments stopped. The school sent a notice about tuition. Still, I waited. "What's going on?" "I made some changes," I said simply. "Changes?" "Mom, Jessica's furious. She thinks you're punishing us." "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm just choosing differently." He exhaled hard. "This isn't like you. Maybe it's exactly like me. Maybe you just never noticed." Silence. "Sophie's been coming to your house," he said. "Every weekend." "She has." "Jessica doesn't know." "Then that's between you and Jessica." Another long pause. Then, quieter. "She talks about you all the time now. about baking, about Grandpa's recipes. She says your kitchen feels like home. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I don't know what to do, Mom. You could start by deciding what kind of father you want to be. What kind of son. That's not my choice to make. He hung up without saying goodbye. I'd expected that, but something had shifted. I could hear it in his voice. Not remorse, not yet, but doubt. A crack in the wall he'd built between us. Jessica cornered me at the grocery store the following week. I was reaching for a bag of flour when I heard her voice behind me. Eleanor. I turned slowly. She looked the same as always. Perfect hair, expensive coat, a cart full of organic everything. Jessica. We should talk. Should we? Her jaw tightened. You've upset David. You've confused Sophie. This whole situation is incredibly disruptive. I set the flour in my basket. Disruptive to what? To our family. Your family, I said. I haven't been part of it for a long time. You made that clear. That's not fair. Maybe not. But it's true. She crossed her arms. Sophie's been different lately, asking questions, wanting to do things by hand. She told her teacher she wants to be a baker when she grows up. And that bothers you? It's not practical. I looked at her for a long moment. The fluorescent lights hummed above us. Someone pushed a cart past, oblivious. You know what's not practical? I said. Spending your whole life trying to impress people who will never be satisfied. I did that for years. With you, with David, with everyone who made me feel like I wasn't enough. I'm done. Her expression flickered. Surprise, maybe. Or something closer to recognition. Sophie is always welcome in my home, I continued. I won't apologize for loving her, and I won't pretend that your rejection didn't hurt. But I'm not asking for your approval anymore. I turned and walked toward the checkout line. She didn't follow. Christmas that year was quiet. I didn't wait for an invitation that wouldn't come. Instead, I made a small dinner for myself, roasted chicken and vegetables and a single slice of apple pie. I donated boxes of baked goods to the shelter downtown. I wrapped presents for children I'd never met, labeling each one from someone who cares, and on Christmas morning, I found a card in my mailbox. Sophie's handwriting again, careful and uneven. Grandma, I made you something. Inside was a drawing, a kitchen, with a big window and a stove and two figures standing side by side. One tall with gray hair, one small with a red bow. Underneath, she'd written, "This is us. This is home." I hung it on my refrigerator next to Harold's photo. Spring arrived slowly, the way it does in Ohio. The crocuses pushed through the half-frozen ground, and the light lasted a little longer each day. Sophie still came every Saturday. We'd moved on from pies to bread pudding, from cookies to cinnamon rolls. She kept a notebook now, copying recipes in her careful handwriting, adding notes in the margins. More vanilla. Grandma says, "Trust your nose." One afternoon, she looked up from her dough and said, "Daddy came to talk to Mommy last night. They were fighting." I kept my hands moving. About what? About you. About money. About me. She paused. He said he was sorry. Not to me. To her. But I think he meant it for you too. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. Do you think people can change, Grandma? I think they can. But they have to want to. She thought about this. I want to change. I want to be someone who makes things, not someone who just buys them. I smiled. Then you're already on your way. A month later, David showed up at my door. No call, no warning. He stood on the porch in the rain, looking older than I remembered. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. He sat at my kitchen table, the same table where he'd eaten cereal as a boy, where he'd done homework and argued about curfews and announced he was getting married. "I've been thinking," he said slowly, "about what you said, about what kind of man I want to be." I waited. I let Jessica make all the decisions, about the house, about Sophie, about you. I told myself it was easier, that keeping the peace was more important than doing what was right. And now? He looked at me, really looked, for the first time in years. Now I don't know if there's any peace left to keep." I reached across the table and touched his hand. "That's the first honest thing you've said to me in a very long time." He didn't cry, but his eyes glistened, and he didn't pull away. "Sophie wants to spend more time here," he said. "Not just Saturdays. Maybe some weekdays. Maybe part of the summer. She's always welcome. You know that." "I know." He paused. "And I'm sorry. For all of it. For not standing up. For letting you feel invisible. For pretending that writing checks could replace showing up." I nodded. It wasn't enough. Not yet. But it was a beginning. "We're not going to fix everything today," I said. "But you being here, saying this, that matters." He stayed for an hour. We drank coffee and talked about small things. The garden I was planning, a fishing trip he remembered from childhood, the way Harold used to burn toast every single morning and pretend it was on purpose. When he left, he hugged me at the door. A real hug, the kind he used to give before he got too old, too careful, too far away. I watched his car pull out of the driveway and disappear down the street. Then I went back to the kitchen, opened the drawer, and pulled out Sophie's letter. I read it one more time, tracing my finger over the words I'd written months ago. Be yourself. Be soft. Be strong. Be someone who makes things with her hands and her heart. I tucked it back into the envelope and placed it with Harold's recipes, safe and waiting. Summer came, and with it, Sophie. She spent 3 weeks with me in July, sleeping in the guest room that used to be David's, waking early to help me water the garden, staying up late to roll dough for the next day's bread. We entered a pie in the county fair. She did most of the work herself. Apple, brown butter, a pinch of cardamom, her grandfather's recipe. She won second place, but when she saw the ribbon, she didn't cheer or jump up and down. She just held it in both hands and said, "I wish Grandpa could see this." "He can," I told her. "He's in every bite." One evening, as the sun was setting and the fireflies were just starting to blink over the backyard, she turned to me and asked, "Grandma, what are you now?" I thought for a moment. "I'm someone who stopped waiting to be chosen," I said, "and started choosing myself." She nodded like she understood. And I think she did. So here I am. Older. Steadier. No longer quiet in the ways that used to cost me. If you're listening to this, maybe you know what it feels like. To pour yourself into something and have it pushed away. To love people who treat your presence like an inconvenience. To shrink yourself small enough to fit into someone else's version of acceptable. If that's you, I want you to hear me. You are allowed to stop. You are allowed to set down the dish, close the door, and walk away from tables where you were never given a seat. Not in anger, not in revenge, just in truth. The people who love you will find you. The ones who matter will show up at your door with questions and flour-dusted hands and hearts wide open. And the ones who don't? Let them go. Make the pie anyway. Teach the recipe to whoever wants to learn. Fill your kitchen with warmth and your life with people who see you. Really see you. Not for what you can give, but for who you are. That's what I did. And if this story reminded you of someone you miss, or something you lost, or a version of yourself you're ready to reclaim, leave a comment. Share it with someone who needs to remember. You're not alone, and neither am I. Not anymore.